So it's just WRPS.
Our regular board meeting, school district 2. We'll begin with the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. Nice to see everybody here. Mr. Peterson, do we have some delegation?
Yes, we certainly do. Mr. Thornton, now my fourth year as superintendent, which saying that just is surprising to me. It seems like just yesterday that I was sitting on that side of the table. However, as part of the superintendent's job, it's always a wonderful part to have new things happen. And although this is a sad time, because we are going to recognize 2 board members tonight who are in their last official meeting as members of the board. I want to go down some events that have happened over the course of the last 4 years since Clark and Jacob have been a member of the board, and give you a little idea of the things that happened in the last 4 years. And since they were elected, they oversaw a superintendent search. They adopted, as part of the board, they adopted Character Strong to support K-12 students district-wide. I know they're happy that they have been a member of the board during the 4 years of labor peace. We've had strong labor relations in the last 4 years. Clark and Jacob have been a part of approving a transitional kindergarten program for the district. They recently approved a K-12 MAP assessment program for the district. They passed a successful maintenance and operations levy. Over the course of 4 years, they visited multiple schools in person to review programming, ask questions. They oversaw the completion of an upgraded ECAP facility. They engaged community concerns whenever, wherever needed. Supported the district with policies that were good for kids and kept kids at the center of those decisions. They led with determination during COVID and got kids back into school in person before many larger districts in our area. They oversaw 3 different formats of graduation during that time, which I guarantee almost no other board members at any time will ever get to say they got to oversee 3 different formats. And I think in something that's a tribute to both of them, they were never afraid at any time to ask hard questions and seek the answers. So with that, on behalf of the district, if I could have Jacob and Clark join me up front. And since the camera's that way, I've got a plaque for each one of you, and they read, for your leadership in the community and unwavering support of the kids and families of the town of Benton City School District, your service has made a difference. Jacob, thank you so much. And Clark, thank you so much. Awesome. And yeah, the final thing I would just say is, all pomp and circumstance aside, I really do appreciate the work both of you done on the board. I'm a better superintendent for having you both on the board, and can't thank you enough. Of course, this really opens up the opportunity now for you to attend the community meetings that I have regularly. Yeah, that invitation will forever be open now. And of course, during the course course of the years to come, I'm sure that I'll have reason to reach out to one or both of you for different things and get your opinions off the record, of course. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
I know it's been good to have a board to work with. Julie and I have been on a board where you can't work with. Because ideas are divergent. Okay, next on our agenda is proposed consent agenda. We've all read, or is that it? Do we have questions? Comments?
Just a question about the inclusion contract with ESD. What are we paying them to do?
Okay, so the inclusion contract through the ESD, we are part of a cohort of schools around the state that are part of an inclusion grant. And so we were awarded a grant for an inclusion project from the state of Washington, which means that then we train our teachers at every building, all of our administrators on practices to best and better include our typically non-traditional IEP students in more general ed and more general curriculum offerings. It's called inclusion because for the longest time, quite frankly, special needs students were often placed in classrooms where they didn't get to interact as much with other general education population students. And this is an effort by the state, and it's really a nationwide effort to include those students in the regular day-to-day life of every other student. And as I think teachers would tell you, there are differences on how you do instruction when you have to also make accommodations for kids who may have different needs than the general population. So by teaching them the strategies to enhance those kids being in classes, it makes everyone's experience better for that.
Do we pay that grant by usage, by student population, by?
It's a flat award to the district, and then we have certain criteria that we have to make sure and meet. In other words, our administrators have to all be involved at the building level and at the central office administration level.
Okay.
And then we have to have what's called an implementation team of teachers who agree to attend a certain amount of trainings throughout the year. It was right before COVID, I believe in January before COVID, that some of that funding was specific for the travel that we had to do to go to Seattle and all get trained. Now, almost all of that has been done online. In fact, many of our teachers took a 2-hour class this morning prior to conferences on the inclusionary methods.
So that's just us paying out the grant money we got to.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep,
And I have one more thing I always complain about, business and occupation tax. Why does the state give us money, which we then pay back to them as a business and occupation tax? I don't understand the idea. How are we considered a business with respect to the state? Put you on the spot.
this is a rhetorical question.
Yeah, I don't.
It is kind of a rhetorical
Yeah.
question. And you know, it's the sort of thing I've talked to our
Yep.
representatives about. I don't understand why we have to pay taxes.
I agree.
I mean, everybody in the organization, except for us, of course, are considered employees of the state. So we're a state operation. So why do we have to pay state taxes on everything we do?
I agree.
So
Yeah. If I had a good answer for you, I'd give it to you. But no, there's no real rhyme or reason why we pay, use tax on things. We pay, excise tax on things. There's a bunch of different things that go into it that what you would think is a normal non-business activity for a school district. But everything from the school district of our size and lower all the way up to university is all under the same guidelines and same rules.
it just seems, taking from one hand and giving to the other. It just seems very counterproductive. So
Yeah.
I always complain about it every time I see it on the thing.
Yep.
Everybody knows that. And so you'll have to miss that.
Yeah.
Will you come and give us public comments for your
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah, we encourage that, please.
All right. That's all I have.
All right.
Anybody else?
It's almost like a rite of passage, actually.
Yeah. You have your challenge. Okay, well, the chair would entertain a motion.
I will move to pass the consent agenda. As is.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that passes unanimous. Well, we'll move on to public comments. Do we have any written?
We're all looking at our
At our
soon-to-be
one
new
public.
board member, Mr. Skipper.
I didn't have anything planned to say, but my name is Josh Skipper, and I'm looking forward to joining you. And Clark, hope I can fill your shoes and do an admirable job here, Steve. Thank you both for your service here, Jacob, and look forward to seeing you all.
Excellent.
All right, thank you.
Awesome.
Okay, how about board comments?
I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank Jolene Calcidias. To me, is just an amazing coach. Sorry to see her go, but I understand. She just had a knack for finding a role for every athlete and making them, feel purposeful and included and supported. And just really appreciate everything she did for the volleyball program.
For many years.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes, I'd like to second that
Absolutely.
sentiment. She was a good part of Ivy for a long time. She'll be missed. I assume she's moving on to Waloop, is that?
I think if what I've heard is correct, it's strictly for personal reasons.
Oh, okay.
She certainly has some cute grandbabies to spend
Yeah.
more time with.
I think she's got her hands full.
Yeah.
Well, I want to echo Mr. Peterson and thanking Jacob and Clark and other contributions. It really does take all of us because everybody thinks of something in a different fashion and brings up a different question. And I can see why they put at least 5 people, because 3 people could side, 5 people and too many, and you got a committee, and then it's hard to wield, but 5 people seems about right. So we'll miss your contributions. Anything else? So final parting shot?
Can I give us a final, can I give a final parting shot next week as a public comment?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's what I'll be doing.
All right, then we'll move on to unfinished business. Our first one is policy 3225, our school-based threat assessment. Pretty much ran through this one a couple times.
Just as a note, we started this conversation around the idea that while this is a practice that we have been doing, that this is a policy we need to have place in district policy for compliance reasons. We have had 2 trainings already this year, formal trainings through the ESD. And I'm very happy to say that our school district is now 100% compliance. All of our staff who were recommended for the training have taken the training either in person or online. And I can honestly say that's the first time I've ever been a part of a district where we had that level of compliance. So all of our administrators and all of our counselors have gone through this training. So
We put together teams to practice.
yeah, in fact, the next level of training, I think we've demonstrated the needs behind it, the reasons behind it, the whys. Now it's going to be looking very much more specifically at school-based teams and running some scenarios for practice purposes, and then actually implementing it and discussing kids. So we're a lot farther down the road than we were.
Any discussions or comments? Okay, we're seeking approval for this.
I move to approve policy 3225, the school-based threat assessment.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes
Thank you.
unanimous. Then moving on to policy 1340. In our second reading, targeting student learning.
So the only changes to the policy are actually, they were denoted in red when I sent them. And I'm looking at Heidi, did they go out in red? Or were they black? Just so everybody could see them easier, I put them in red, but it's absolutely okay if they're not in red.
I believe they were.
The main things that changed were that I simply shifted some of the topics, moved them to some dates that would better coincide with what was happening in the schools at the time. Moved one of our parent engagement pieces from October, which is, quite frankly, we're in the middle of parent engagement at that time, and had us talk about that in August, which will give us a really good opportunity to show the board exactly what is going to be happening during the school year prior to the school year happening. So the only other piece that I made a slight change to was simply the reference to policy governance, and the idea that it says in the policy that can be done as a part of a self-assessment by the board, and I simply put as needed, meaning the board is not required to do a self-assessment. However, if they choose to, this would be the best time to be working on. Those were the only changes, nothing from the meaning or the implications from the policy change. Everything is just shifted a bit.
Just adjusted the schedule to match
Correct.
our needs.
Yep.
Any comments or questions? I like the August one. That one I didn't have. Looks like we kind of switched it the way I thought. Or maybe we talked about that last time.
I think I just said I was
Assessment
gonna do some rearranging. I'm gonna reiterate though, again, I think that the board considering this policy, I think is a good move for the board itself, as well as a reinforcement that as much as we spend time on fiduciary items, that the bottom line is the board is also here to make sure our kids are getting the best education possible, and that reinforces this.
Any other comments?
After reading it, again, this
Mhm.
time, I did see in there where it says that we are, with the assistance of parents and staff and community members, we're gathering information and that we're evaluating policy and setting policy in these key areas. And so I feel that we're still within our role and not overstepping that, as long as we are just getting input from stakeholders and
Yep.
Yep, for the purpose of making policy amendments or new policies. Well, this is the second reading, but we're free to approve it if we're all in agreement. We don't have any complaints.
I prefer just to stick to the third reading, just in case.
Okay.
And if I'm not mistaken, and Heidi will correct me if I'm wrong, that we have this policy up on the website now as a policy under consideration. So anybody who's watching, of course, can certainly look at our website and they have any input, be more than happy to hear it.
Okay, well, we'll move on to new business. First is the minutes from last meeting. Entertain a motion to approve those. Questions or comments?
I'll move to approve the minutes from 11/21.
I'll second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, Mark, that passes unanimous. Unanimous 405. Okay, and then moving on to a levy rate update, Mr. Beckley.
Yes.
Info.
Thank you, Mr. Thornton. Now that I understand exactly what you want. Good news is, or the bad news is your assessed value increased between 2019 to 2021 by about $150 million. Between 2020 and 2021, the assessed value increased by $36.6 million. So we're at a grand total of $908,861,448 worth of assessed valuation
Within our district.
within our district. The good news is that with that increase also comes an increase despite the fact that our approved levy amount of $1.44 for the enrichment went, it decreased from the last enrichment which was basically $1.72. So we're at $1.44 now. So the expected revenue based off of that is $1,308,759. Had it been, if the assessed value had not gone up, we would have seen a decrease of about $295,000 from the $1.71 to the $1.44 if we had not seen the $36 million increase in assessed value. So, it's a pretty decent increase, and with the $1.24 that we'll have for the bond capital project, we're going to be sitting right at, a little under $3. So.
But just to clarify, the levy, it's not an increase to the taxes that they're paying.
No,
It's still in the
correct.
No, it's actually a it's actually
I just don't want the confusion. Okay.
No, it's a decrease actually
Right.
from the last one that was approved. Yeah, because like I said, the last one that was approved was $1.71 and 8 decimal places. So
Right.
yeah, there's an actual decrease in the amount. It's just the assessed value that's increased.
Right. Thank you.
So their homes are worth more. So yeah,
Isn't that why we buy homes?
that's why we
So
buy
they go
homes,
up in
yes, for the
value?
appreciation in value. Yeah,
Equity?
so they're not paying, any
Yes,
more
I do
taxes.
that too.
Yeah.
Otherwise, that rent.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully that
does. Thank you
answered
for-
your question. Yeah,
I
no
just wanted to
problem.
make sure, we said $1.50 and we came in under,
Yeah.
so I wanted to just double check on that. Thank you.
Yeah, and that revenue will start being generated January 2022. So,
Right.
you will have the 8 decimal places that show up on a Benton County Treasurer's report when they do the 2022 tax booklet. So I'll have a real firm number of what it is, but right now $1.44 is about as nailed down as I can get it.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
we'll be receiving the max that we asked for.
Absolutely.
And not a penny more.
Exactly. Okay. Thank you. That's exactly what we were asking. Okay, next up, Mr. Peterson with our curriculum review and our draft of the new cycle that we're going to adopt, or
Yeah, and actually, it's very much, it is a draft. If the board remembers, the last time that we've had a document in front of the board regarding curriculum review in the cycle, we were working off of a 3-year increment for each particular subject area. We took a year to plan it, and we took a year to do it and to try it out, and then we had a year to fully implement. Given the fact that we've had 2 years now where we have just not, quite frankly, we haven't done anything with curriculum. I felt the need as I was reviewing the whole process to condense that into a 2-year process first, and to pick up right where we left off with our needs. So the first thing that you see that we're, after consulting with principals and a few teachers, they've convinced me that we can do even more condensed with our reading program, K-5, and we can start a review cycle with the idea of adopting and implementing for 22-23 a K-5 reading program. And now the last time that we had that program fully go through the process and brought before the board was 13-14. So we're due. I don't mind saying I was originally a bit skeptical. But when Julie brought it up, and after I talked to a few people, there's a groundswell of people who are willing to take the time and effort to do that, because they recognize that we're behind where we should have been. So we're going to start that, quite frankly, December. December is not going to be that month where we just slide into Christmas break. We've got several things in the fire that we're going to start on in December. So then, in my other conversation, specifically with Joni Ashley, we have new science curriculum. And a lot of it, quite frankly, is just sitting because we were unable to do any training up to this point on how do our teachers implement the new curriculum. So we are going to start that process of getting teachers trained and hopefully be able to start implementation during the second half of the school year. You know, when Joni and I were talking with a couple of teachers in passing, I mean, it became very apparent that they wanted to do it. They just didn't know, quite frankly, the system. How do we roll this out, having not been trained, knowing that these labs are available, but what does that mean for the rest of the day for it to look like? So we're gonna jump on the curriculum bandwagon and see if we can't get some trainers either out here virtually or in person to get our teachers coached up and get that implemented. So then after that, what you really see is a doubling up of some of our major curricular areas, meaning where we might have done one implementation over the course of a year and then a year of training. We're going to try and do two at a time to get us caught up in some of those major areas. To put us back on track really is where you see that in, I believe it's 24-25, you see we look at science again. By that time, what I'm hoping is we can then slow back down to just doing one curricular area at a time. And really, I don't think that'll be a full adoption for that year because we haven't even implemented the last one completely yet. It's really going to be kind of a review at that time to make sure we're going down the right path with it. So you're looking at about a 5-year, cut from 6 years down to 5 years, with implementation being a 2-year process as opposed to 3. So we're crunching it in the cycle wise, and we're crunching the amount of time that we would be reviewing and implementing. But we're due in several areas. One of the things that I've found is, I think just given COVID and given the uncertainty at certain times during the past 5-6 years, I think that people were just not wanting to get started on a review, not knowing exactly where it ended up. And so we're a little bit behind the 8 ball, but we're going to get it back online. And my goal is within 2 to 3 years to have us adopted in our core areas. And then quite frankly, we do need to take a hard look at our fine arts, our online programming, things of that nature, because some of those haven't had attention in a long time. Formal adoption in the arts, I believe, goes all the way back to 1999. So as I'm hunting and pecking through some of the documents and looking at what's been done and what hasn't been done, there's some concerning dates out there, but within this cycle, we're going to get back on track. So this is purely a draft. I purposely didn't include some things that I think we will include in the final draft, but this takes care of most of our core areas. And we have some teachers, like I said, and not just in the elementary reading, we have some people that are really ready and on board to take a hard look at what our curriculum adoption process is, and quite frankly, how we're pushing kids and increasing standards at the same time. So that's kind of exciting. Again, it's nice to be having those kinds of conversations with the board, not just COVID and PPE and those types of things. But I fully intend in our January meeting to give you a progress report on how we're starting up the K-5 reading adoption program process.
Now, we used to have a curriculum committee.
Correct.
And do we still have that? Are we going to reenact it, or are we going to change the way you do it?
My experience has been that we have a curriculum committee made up, in the elementary's case, many of the same teachers may end up serving on that committee because obviously an elementary teacher teaches all the different subjects. When we're talking about secondary, it's really going to come down to that committee being made up of people who teach in the content area. As a former English teacher, history major, I want no part of a decision-making process of what makes a good math book. I want to talk to the people teaching the math book and have them demonstrate to me why it's as good as they say. So that part the secondary will always rotate a little bit, but there will always be a committee of teachers and administrators who will present to the board the process that we went through, the options that we looked at, the most important things we put at the top of the list, and why the recommendation is before the board for adoption of whichever curriculum they choose.
Now, years ago, when I first moved here, my daughter started, we would go down to, we would come up here to the district office and sit and review all the different curriculums that were available and make sure we were happy with them. And then actually we'd say, as parents, we like this one best, or kind of vote on it. So that'll be available.
Yes. Yeah, in fact, that's a part of statute that we do have to offer public review of our curricular options. So yes, we'll have, I don't want to put them all out there, meaning we could literally take 6 months looking at 15 different curricula, but I think that once the group takes a good look at it and says, okay, we need to choose from these 3, then I think absolutely we put them out for public access. And if we find that we struck out with all 3 of them, and we need to broaden the scope of how we went about it, I think there's no problem, we do that. I think hopefully we would be choosing between 2 to 5, no more than 5 curricula that would run the gamut, offering certain advantages in certain areas. Some are obviously going to be stronger to some state standards, others are going to be stronger to others. But the public review is an integral part of that. Ideally, we get a couple community members who would like to be a part of the actual review and the going through and the matching of standards. That's a lot to ask, especially when we have.
He's retired.
I'm retired.
Clark's retired and soon to be off the board, so we've got a standing committee member. So ideally, we would have some folks like that willing to do it. And certainly there are folks in town who have specialty areas or areas of interest that they have good working knowledge of. So the invitation is going to be out there. I'm just happy we're starting the process, and we're going to have some real recommendations for the board. We haven't done any formal adoption since I've been here, so it's important that we get that process started.
So a couple things I like about the schedule is as I look through it, even though we are doubling up, we're not doubling up on a teacher having to adopt 2. We're looking at doubling up at the secondary level. So I like that. And then one suggestion, or maybe something just to get more input on, because if we are implementing K-12 science this year, I would maybe suggest moving that to 2025, 26, and pulling the math K-6 a year.
Yep.
So in front of that. So, but I'm very happy that we can start moving on that reading. And then I know currently primary and intermediate are using the same curriculum, and I, of course, we will go with whatever the committees recommend. But I would like to have the option of maybe not choosing the same, the secondary, or I should say the primary versus the intermediate, or feeling maybe different curriculum would be best suited for that age group, so that we would try to make that option available for them.
Yeah, I have zero problem with that. I think the main thing, when we get to that time when we're making that distinction, is ensuring that the standards that are focused on at the primary level are then reinforced at the intermediate. Because what we don't want to see is a gap where we miss out on certain standards simply because choosing to curriculum, address them in different areas.
Right.
But there's no limitation on that, I can tell you that.
Any other question, comment? Okay, good luck.
No, this will be before the board again as unfinished business.
Yep.
As we just narrow up, get some of the details worked out.
Take the draft part off.
Yep, exactly.
All right, moving on, athletic COVID testing. And I brought this up for discussion. Mainly my concern, which is, driven by the Department of Health and the WIAAs. I guess, I don't know if it's a standard, but it's their recommendation that we test unvaccinated students, let the vaccinated students slide by without a test. And not that the school tests them publicly, lines them all up and says, you guys don't have to test, you guys do, they don't do it that way. They bring students in individually. But either way, if you segregate students, whether it's vaccinated or unvaccinated, basketball versus wrestling or whatever, once you start segregation, it's never proven to be good. And so my comment was, why don't we just test everybody? I mean, that way it's easy and everybody gets tested, and who knows, some vaccinated guy might come out positive, and we'll find out, that.
I've come prepared.
Oh,
First of all, good for you. I'm concerned that we actually have students that have gotten the COVID vaccine. And the reason is, I don't know if you're aware, but Germany, France, Sweden, and Finland all recommended that people not take the Moderna vaccine if you are in the age range below 27 years old, because the rate of heart inflammation of a Moderna vaccine is 11 per 100,000, which is actually pretty high, considering the consequences for that age group is very low of getting COVID. For the Pfizer, it's 4.68 per 100,000, and I'm going for a appointment with my cardiologist, and I was going to quiz him on how problematic getting a heart inflammation is. I don't think it's trivial, and I don't know what the long-term effects of that are. So I'm concerned about that. But the predictive value of any disease, this is from the FDA's website on vaccines, or on testing. Positive predictive value varies with the prevalence when interpreting the results of a diagnostic test. So the more people have it, the more false positives you get. And that number, if it's fairly prevalent, meaning that it's in, say, 20%, if there's a 10% prevalence, so it's 10% of the people have COVID in the area, you will have 20 out of 100 positive tests could and probably are false positives. That's a large number, okay? And you can do a second test, but that what do you believe then? Do you believe the negative test? Because you can also have false negatives, and they have that as well. Generally, the negative tests seem to be a little bit lower than not. So from what I read off of their website is that you should take local prevalence into consideration, consider clinical observations, is the person sick, patient history, and epidemiological information of the patients themselves. So it just seems to me that having everybody take the test is counterproductive. We're going to have a large number of people. 20% is a large number of false positives. And so that, in the absence of any other symptoms, anything else that would lead you to believe it to be a problem, I would recommend against just blanket testing everybody. No virus in the past has been tested this way. Okay, and because if you're not sick, if you're not showing any symptoms, it really isn't a case. So, and I'm very disappointed in our health department that they don't tell you about any of this, right? I don't know. Did you know how large the false positive rates were?
I knew they were.
It's pretty big. At this point, if you ever get a false positive, unless you get 2 false negatives afterwards, they consider you to, and you have to act like you do have COVID-19. So
our canceled football game could have been a false event.
it could have been.
Well, I did hear that there were some concerns from our parents on how the testing was done. The way I understood it was the unvaccinated athletes were lined up in the middle school hallway, and then they brought them in at a group at a time and tested them and had them wait for their results. And so pretty much, I think my concern and these parents' concern was the privacy of the vaccination status of their children. And I'm opposed to, any policy or practice that would, violate that privacy.
Mhm.
I think it could, because we're treating people differently, it could cause, it's very, people from both sides, vaccinated and unvaccinated, have very strong opinions.
Mhm.
And it could, by granting a privilege of not testing to one group and a stricter requirement to another group, I think it puts pressure on the unvaccinated group. And I think it's a personal choice for our families, whether they choose to do that. I don't think the district should be putting that pressure on them. And so to me, it's, however we handle this, we need to find a way to do it privately. So one thought would be just to test them all. Then you don't know who is vaccinated, who's unvaccinated. Right now, I believe that the count was 35 students are vaccinated. So it's, that would be the additional testing. The other idea that I had would be that possibly we could let the parents test them at home, that the parents could come pick up those tests, do the tests at home, and report that to the athletic director. And so those are my thoughts.
What is the requirement by WIAA as far as testing?
That are unvaccinated athletes that are in close contact or high respiratory. I can't remember the term, but
Right.
they're cheerleaders because they're
Aerosol.
Aerosol, there we go.
That was the word.
But in those sports, the unvaccinated students have to be tested before traveling to an away game, right?
We have to test all of our unvaccinated winter athletes within 24 hours of a contest.
All contests.
So
Inside,
How
indoor
many
sports.
winter athletes do we have?
we have 125.
So we're saying that on average, we're going to have somewhere between 15 and 20 test positive, even if they don't have any.
I would say in the testing that we have done up to this point, that wouldn't be the case,
Yeah, that's,
simply because the testing that we have done up to this point hasn't shown us anything near that number of positives. And I can't speak to the exact number, but I know that when it came to our canceled high school football game, for instance, there was one positive out of several hundred tests that were given. It was given at the same time as the dance. So I can tell you that I delivered 220, I think, tests. We went through about 160, and we had one positive case who happened to be a football player.
If the prevalence is low, the positivity rate is low. However, even at 0.1% prevalence in the area, the positivity rate would be 4 out of 100 people.
Mhm.
Which we're required to test anyway. It
And-
was about 100, right? I mean, so we're talking about an
Oh, wait,
additional
at a
35.
low prevalence, 96 out of 100 positive results would be false positives. So if there isn't very much in the thing, most of the positive tests will be false. So 19 out of 20.
And I can tell you and again, I'm going to go to the specifics that we've experienced. With the one positive from a rapid test that we had prior to a football game, it was verified positive by 2 non-rapid lab-based results that would have, well, like the one that you see on GW Way when you go through the drive-through that gets sent to the University of Washington. I think with any of our test results that we get, especially the positives, though, we reinforce with parents that this is a rapid test, and now we would highly suggest that you see your family physician and receive the next higher grade of test.
But the numbers I'm giving you are for the antigen test, not for the PCR rapid test. So even if the COVID in the population is very low, the positives we have generally won't even be positives. 19 out of 20. I have a real hard time because we have been in this emergency mode for 2 years, and they have not changed the tests. They have not changed how they do the tests, and they know what the problems are. So
they
I'll
are
take
taking
my
the
shot
lessons
that they
learned
don't
to heart.
recognize natural immunity. But,
exactly.
Well, and the one thing I would remind the board, because it's how I sleep at night, is that we're charged with enforcing the Department of Health and the WIA guidelines for participation. And so, those things aside, while I personally may not agree with the manner in which we do it or the restrictions that we're being caused, I would say that we're going to abide by the regulations we have to in order for our kids to compete, I guess is the best way to say it. Because I think that not doing so would be a much bigger negative impact on our kids.
absolutely, and I'm not
We have to-
suggesting that
No,
we
I-
don't do
We have to
that.
do
Yep,
the
I
minimum.
just
agree.
would like us to keep their vaccination status private and.
And I know from having the conversations around vaccinated status of a lot, quite frankly, all the employees that work here in the district. If we need to do a better or different job, remember, we haven't tested at the high school yet. The only kids that we've tested are at the middle school level. I'm sorry?
It starts next week.
But high school starts next week. So if where the concern is ensuring the privacy of those individuals, I would say that a quick meeting with Mr. Denbor and a review of the process that we're going to go through to ensure that happens is in order, because we're still 6 days away from actually doing that testing. And we bring Teresa, our school nurse, in and have her review the process and ensure that the privacy aspect has to be.
I think parents should be aware of the process as well.
Mhm.
And I would still just put in another plug for, you know, if they're not happy with it, they still want their child to participate in sports, give them that option to test at home or at another place and provide us with the results.
Well, if we only have 13 of these athletes that are vaccinated,
35,
35.
28%,
48%,
28.
28%. How many of these COVID tests are we saving by not testing everybody?
35?
35.
Times however many
20%.
games they have,
20%?
Right.
yeah.
So you're looking at a total of 70 a week over the course of so 700 tests. That the tests themselves aren't I mean, I think I can speak for most and say, for us personally, the difference between testing is not significant. I think when the WIAA makes these suggestions, they're making them at the state level, and what they're implying is if everybody does this, we're going to have a problem. Now, we've already found that we have switched brands of our rapid tests because of the high demand nationwide. So these are taking a little bit longer to get, so we're ordering more of them in advance, and I don't see it being a problem. I think the bigger question would be, if it's only a few, I don't think it's going to have any impact whatsoever. I think the fear is that if everybody decides to start testing everybody, then we could run into a bottleneck.
But if none of our athletes were vaccinated, we'd be testing them all anyways, right?
Right.
So, I mean, how do they know? I mean, they don't necessarily know what the numbers are. And we had no idea going into it what the numbers would be, how many kids would be and wouldn't be. So, I don't know. It's just.
I think what we have to do is disassociate ourselves a little bit from what is the problem we can fix
Right.
and we want to fix versus what are the problems. And those, in my experience, during the 2 years of COVID have been two entirely different things.
Yeah.
If really what we're focused on is the privacy of students and their vaccination status, I'm highly confident that we can figure out a way to get that accomplished.
Well, and there's the perception part too. I mean, even if the parents perceive, if they say, hey, I got my kid vaccinated, so he wouldn't have to test.
Right.
And that's very true.
Are they gonna?
And I know the board, I forwarded to the board over the weekend, one of the concerns from our high school administration is, and I think it's valid. Again, keeping a wide thought process. We have, as a board, for the last, since March 17th of 2019, we have been, we've gone along with Department of Health regulations, and we've been fairly, as much as we didn't like some of the restrictions, some of the mandates, we've said, yeah, but we're going to follow this line. And I don't think it's any, I know Mr. Denboer and Mr. Henry would say, if we're going to step across that line for this instance, will there be another case where in Mr. Denboer's case, the question came up, well, if a non-vaccinated student, or excuse me, a vaccinated student now has to test, does a non-vaccinated or does a vaccinated student now have to quarantine? Because that is a difference between our vaccinated and unvaccinated kids. If a vaccinated student is a close contact, they do not get sent home. They do not get sent home from practice. They do not get sent home from school.
I would not suggest changing that.
I completely and I'm simply trying to, I'm looking at their logic and their line of thought. I
just want us to do a better job protecting their privacy, and I don't want to, create more division and conflict amongst our staff or, later on, with our students and potentially later on with the staff. And I don't want, even just having that, from WIA that we have to test vaccinated, the unvaccinated. To me, that creates an incentive to get the vaccine, a pressure to get it, and then it awards someone else a privilege. And, kids are gonna talk, they're gonna know who was sitting next to them in line, or, they had to go to the library, they saw all the kids, whatever, and I don't want the social pressure put on them, and I think it just needs to be protected.
And it's actually very disingenuous, because there's in 35 jurisdictions, states, they're having a spike in Delta virus. And that spike is almost 100% breakthrough.
And our rates are practically down before the Delta in our area. We're at like almost to like 180 right now,
So
per
does-
100,000.
Now, I can give the example of Pacific Northwest National Lab. 80%, it's probably higher than that now, but they had 80% vaccinated, 20% not vaccinated. 60% of the positive tests came from vaccinated people, 40% came from unvaccinated. So that obviously means that more of the unvaccinated tested positive as a fraction. However, the total number of people running around that had COVID, there was more vaccinated people that had COVID than non-vaccinated people. So you say those people don't have to test. That's my problem is you're now being disingenuous. Why are you testing? If you can have breakthrough, and they're having breakthrough, a lot of it, shouldn't we have them all? And this is the problem is, are there going to be enough tests? Well, that's something they have to solve, right? That's not something we have to solve. You're ordering the things. So I would err on the side of testing everybody in this case.
Right.
Even though we know, especially because we're low prevalence, any positive tests we have, the larger fraction of them are going to be false positives. Any positives we get, most of them are going to be false positives. So by having the vaccinated people doing it, now we add that extra pool to the numbers, and we're going to have more people, the potential for more. I don't know how many it's going to do. So, I'm just taking the numbers right off. So,
This is our last board meeting though, Pete, before we start this testing. So I'm like,
Correct.
Well, I really think, like Julie says, I think at this point, our number one concern has to be protecting those kids' privacy. We know darn well they're all gonna talk to each other. They're all gonna know who is and who isn't and whatever, but that's up to them to do. It's not up to us to light them up on a wall so that when Billy Bob walks by, he knows that Johnny is not vaccinated. So that's not our job. Our job is to protect these kids, and testing them privately is the only way we can do that. So we have to figure that out. Definitely. At both.
Yeah, I have not received any information about any vaccinated students at the middle school.
Okay.
So at this point, I'm going with the idea that, I've asked to get the number of vaccinated people. I haven't received any.
Okay.
So I would say, if I had to put this out, and what my recommendation would be is, let us use the next 3 days, 3 school days, to ensure that privacy happens and that we have a system that ensures that. I think we can do that.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to be any problem.
As much as we might like to dance around the whole testing thing.
I
it's
can't
just
see it
not.
though, Pete. I'm sorry. We have 100 kids that we have to test I mean, if we're calling them out of class, I mean, then it's known who's getting called out of class, you know, if they're on a line. I don't know how I don't know. I don't see it happening in a private way in our facilities. I just,
Well, and so here's the question. I mean, if we have all of our athletes having to report somewhere at the same time, regardless of their status, and they all go behind a closed door, one at a time or five at a time. I mean, literally, there are logistics that we will have to do.
Sure.
We don't call kids out of class. We don't, I mean, that's not gonna happen. Kids will come as a member of a team, so a
Right.
small group in comparison to the 100
Right. Like
some.
all the basketball players.
We have all of the basketball players, they all cycle through a room,
so you like pull the whole team through
Right.
and
one at
some,
a time, either test them or not, but everyone goes into the testing
and
room.
then everyone goes into the waiting
Okay.
area.
I
and-
can see it now.
Sure,
Okay, okay,
That
thank
makes
you.
sense.
And I think the most, obviously, and one of the things that I've said to the board many times is also if something doesn't work correctly, we fix it. Obviously with this, we want to put as much forethought into it as possible, so we don't have to fix it, but I'm fairly confident there are ways, I mean, physically, it's a large high school. We can have several different areas doing testing at any one time prior to school starting, lunchtime, after school, before practice. We also have different times for different teams, depending on what practice is happening, what time. So if we have boys practice doesn't start until 7 o'clock at night because of gym usage, we've got a lot of time during the after school between end of school and practice where we can make things happen.
I can tell you my experience. I had two daughters, they wanted to go to homecoming, and so we couldn't get two tests at the same time because everybody in the world was getting them. So the first one got her test, it was positive. We were shocked, what? Because nobody was sick. And so the other daughter the next day had her test, she was positive. Well, the first daughter started getting sick, second daughter got sick, and we were all sick for 2 weeks. And so tests were true.
Well,
False.
and I think in strictly in what you've told me of your own volition, I might add, you also went and got backup tests done for you and your family. So, those are all the false positives that we're talking about. We'll try and do everything we can before we end up canceling an event or canceling a game.
The other thing is, one of those tests was negative.
So if they test on Thursday and they have a game like Friday and Saturday, like how long is the test valid for? How many days is it valid for?
So if we test on Friday, it's good for 24 hours before the game. But I've been told that we can test once and on a Friday and have it good for the Saturday event. Yeah, that would be in some cases in 3
So
weeks,
it's 24 hours. Is what-
Yep. roughly 24 hours.
So can we push back on any of those stupid
All
rules?
travel.
I mean, is there any way we could,
You have to have it 4 days before you
Yeah,
travel.
yeah.
is it
It's
ESD
crazy.
or whatever? I mean, 24 hours seems like a kind of ridiculous
They're not using the
requirement.
science. I'm sorry.
Even at work, it's 3 days.
That's usually required.
That's the problem.
Yeah, and I think, if this were which test is the PCR? You go in and get sent in, I mean, there were,
The antigen test.
yeah, the antigen. I think if we could say every kid go and get that. Now, obviously, were we in a position for our families to do that, that would be the most private of all. Go get a test on your own.
The problem is you're supposed to wait 24 to 36 hours.
Right,
before
and
you get the
so
second test.
then we start talking about timeframes and discrepancies and who do you.
And they're gonna want to get paid or compensated for time to take the kid in. to get this.
So what I'm hearing though from the board, and while I certainly appreciate the level of discussion, because it's been a very good discussion, I think our main thing that we want to take away from this conversation is, Mr. Peterson, find a way for everybody to be done privately without
One at a
any,
time, right.
without any predispositions or people being able to identify. If they want to talk amongst themselves, we've all had teenagers, we know we can't control that. Or Jacob will have teenagers at some point, so he's something to
But
look
he's been a
forward to.
teenager.
So we know they talk, but we can at least take it outside of the realm of where we control it to the point where it's not discernible.
Yeah, I think we have to do that.
Yeah,
Okay?
it's the best we can do with what we have to do.
Okay. Then I would say
I
that's,
just want to make one more point. Well, we
Yeah.
aren't the only school district making this discussion.
no, we're not the only school district. I think it's one of the things that I sent to the board as well. There is one other school in our league, Natch East, which has instituted this policy. I did some checking around the Tri-City area. There are currently no other schools at this point as of 7 whatever on a Monday evening that are planning on testing everybody. Like I said before, though, things can change fairly quickly. So I think that we give it our best shot. And I think we'll be successful in ensuring some privacy. And then if we have to go down the road of this isn't working well enough, we're going to test everybody, then we go ahead and make that determination at that time.
We'll listen for the feedback.
Mhm.
I would also invite any members of the board, if you'd like to do some observation of the process. If you want to just come hang out and see how things go, I don't think there'd be anybody opposed to that. Of course, I'd tell you when and where.
Yeah.
Wouldn't let you in the room, but
You said at the agenda meeting, it's November 30th. I have in my mind that the next date is for the high school to test.
so we have a high school game, basketball game, which is one of the things I was going to talk about later. We have 3 games next week. So we'll be doing testing on, hey, can you help me out? Is it Monday or it'll be
Tuesday.
Tuesday and Thursday?
If we just send it out. Tuesday review. Thursday wrestling.
It just seems so bizarre to have to do it. If you have 3 games in a week, to do it twice in that week, just, and I understand that that's the rules that are being put down, but it is just bureaucracy run amok. What we have to do, we have to do.
I believe that you could make that argument fairly succinctly.
If we do get any positive tests, okay, basketball is a little bit different, say wrestling.
Mhm.
You get any positive tests, anybody that person wrestled with would have to quarantine, is that correct?
Well, not if they're
Not
vaccinated.
vaccinated, which is,
But that's
Ridiculous.
because you can get breakthrough, and they're getting breakthrough, quite a bit of breakthrough.
Mhm.
So that is a non sequitur, that is not science,
Right.
And that's exactly,
that's
I think some of the,
witchcraft.
I think that's some of the purpose behind some of what Lance was relaying was that if we start down the path, logic is a wonderful thing. A plus B equals C. You can get to see a lot of different routes. And I say we tackle that when it becomes that issue, quite frankly.
Yep, let's just go forward with what we got planned. And see what
But with
happens.
the understanding the board fully expects, and is charged me with ensuring the privacy of all of our kids. No matter how much, and I've said this many times, we make decisions in the best interest of kids, not adults. If it causes adults to have to do something more, we'll make that happen in order to assure the privacy of the kids.
And then to make parents aware of the process so they know beforehand.
Yep,
Maybe you can send us. a
hopefully they'll get
little
on Facebook. I'm sure that'll be one of the first places it goes.
update. Send us a little update middle of the week next week. And see what-
Oh, I guarantee it.
Okay, well, let's just move on to your report.
Let me speak for a little longer.
Well, I tell you what, you know what, I wanted to make sure that I hit some specific talking points with this. So first up is thanks to Mr. Skipper for coming this evening as our new incoming board member who's going to be sworn in on the 13th.
Soon after cussed out.
In also anticipation of filling our final position that will be unfilled. Tomorrow, we will plan on having our applications for residents in voting District 5 to be able to apply back to me and the school district for the board to then consider. We will at whatever point. I don't know that this is actually something we need to say we're going to close it or it's only open for a certain amount of time. Bottom line is that my goal is to then seat a board member at the latest for our first January meeting. Because we will need to have, whether it's associated with our board meeting on the 13th or not, we will have to have a special board meeting to do a public interview process for that person. I think as we get closer to our next board meeting, it may be a situation where we can say we're going to have, well, we don't exactly lack for seating in here right now. But as a part of our regular board meeting, we could have a section that is specifically intended to fulfill the requirements of having that open session for folks who then, they want to come in and hear. I imagine though, our online has been pretty popular. So we might get a lot of folks there. But one way or the other, I think before we head to holiday break that we have an open meeting specifically to interview any prospective candidates who apply. So we'll get the applications out tomorrow. And then I would say, our next formal meeting is the 13th. It probably is going to be through an email update to let you folks know by the end of the first week of December, how many folks have applied for it. And depending on those numbers, we either continue to go out looking for applications, and maybe at the same time, we have initial discussions about when that first meeting would take place, or whether that next public meeting would take place. We hope we have a lot to choose from. If we don't, we don't. But we know that we want to afford everybody the opportunity, and really, that week before we get out of school, I think is our, we need to make a tentative plan to have some type of a special board meeting that week to get that done. If we can't do it on the 13th.
Did we kind of define the area, make a better representation of what the area is in case people have questions?
We certainly
Are
can.
they in and out or?
Yes. Yeah, we've got a
It's tough
basic,
to
we've got a
tell.
basic description. I'm going to encourage anybody who does apply to verify, because the one thing we know is that some folks have thought that they lived in a certain area, and if you look on a map, it certainly looks like it, but then you zoom in and they're
across the street.
across the street, or they're the next house down. So I would always recommend that first. So yes,
I
And then we
believe the
should verify
county,
as well once we get the address and double. check.
Correct.
the county will confirm that for you.
absolutely. So we have that going on. If any of you get a chance to, if any of you are in the high school for any reason, we did a little bit of remodeling in Donna Bumgarner's class. Moved some lockers. Looks like a whole new classroom, quite frankly. It looks double the size. Obviously, we didn't move any walls, but we moved some lockers. Things look really good. We checked that out today. We are in the process of installing a new water softener at the elementary level. Well water out here, those water softeners, we put them through the test. So it's nice to have that going. I already hit on the fact that we've got 100% of our administrators and required staff compliant with our threat assessment training, which is great. And then finally, our 21st Century program, which has been very successful. We're going to have a meeting with them the week after Thanksgiving they would like to reapply for their grant that they get, and they'd also like to put in that they want to extend services to the middle school, which I think is outstanding because we have a lot of our grade school age kids familiar with the program, and as they move up, it would be wonderful to keep some of those same services. So right now, those are my major talking points. The one last thing I would say, and because we were talking about COVID earlier and testing, I do want to throw it out there for everyone. At one of the previous board meetings, I mentioned the angst that we're coming across several of the superintendents' desks with regards to the Biden administration's mandate and the 100 employee factor. And it was the board's decision, I think it was the right one at the time, not to test our unvaccinated employees. And as you will recall, about a month ago, I said with that new passage that it could mean that our untested employees then have to be, or unvaccinated employees have to be tested. If you haven't seen the paper, it has hit a legal snag in Circuit 5. So that is all on hold. And the report from Mr. Weisner at the ESD today was okay, hurry up and wait.
Right.
Because it will take another legal action for that to process through. And I can tell you, I'm going to hurry up and wait. So at this point, we have no plans to do anything until, quite frankly, until the legal process has run its course. So I just want to give you an update on that. Past that, that's my superintendent's report.
Question.
How's the facilities committee coming? Do we still want to encourage people to?
Still want to encourage people.
to join?
You know, I said we have a lot going on in December, and that's one of the things is to try and get that ironed out and get one meeting of that facilities group, even if it's only a small number of folks, maybe not even a full committee, more like a small group. Whatever that looks like, and thank you for the folks who've sent in names up to this point. We have to get going. We have to get some people and at least get them thinking, and then having them hopefully go out and tap somebody they know to come with them to the next meeting. Again, that's something I'd like to have a first meeting of that group if possible before our board meeting on the 13th, so I can at least give you some initial reaction and some initial conversations about that.
Tough time of year.
It's a tough
Yeah.
time of year for a lot of
Gather
things.
people in.
And I know that Heidi's gonna feel the same way. Our agenda for the 13th is it's already building up. One of the commitments I've made is Mr. Bolts is going to be able to solidify and finalize our results from the CEE staff survey. I've said the 13th, that's getting presented, whether he's ready or not. So we're going forward with that. We got a lot of stuff going on, but that's okay. It's good stuff. I'm sorry?
Mr. Beebe,
We can have that discussion later if we choose to.
I just was,
Yep.
okay,
So that's what I've got.
okay. So we are having executive session.
We can have I have nothing for executive session. It's new to report from what I shared with the board. However, we might want to bring one of our exiting board members up to speed on what we talked about before the meeting as well. So I would say it would be brief at
Okay.
best.
Okay, so we'll have a 15-minute
There you go.
executive session, and then after which we'll be adjourned.
There you go.
Guess I better leave my message. Well, we're looking forward to seeing you, Josh. 2 weeks from
I'm
today.
sorry, I might-
Sorry, a couple minutes.
Oh, questions.
See you tomorrow.
From-
Oh, I wonder,
Yesterday.
You didn't get my message, did you?
No.
Oh, I give you a little messenger message. You know where the